Hey guys, Bike here, and I'm back again with another Last Epoch video. This one is going to be another unique deep dive. Titanheart. So I know this is a little bit lo-fi. I typically have some B-roll and I go into this whole preamble about the item and what it does, but I'm kind of busy this week, unfortunately. Hopefully next week we're all back to, square one. But also it's a little hard to show a build showcase for something like Titanheart. Most of you guys probably already know about the item, but I still occasionally get questions of why do you use Titanheart versus Nullport. And so I figured I kind of go into it right here. I know I did discuss Titanheart in depth in my build guide review for Blackblade Rive. If you haven't checked that out, description link in the description down below. But if you just wanted to hear about Titanheart, this is the video for you. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we got right here. So Titanheart, why do a lot of people use it? Well, it is one of the items in the game that gives you damage reduction, and it can be used by all classes. And for some classes, that's a good amount of armor to get. Now, I feel like most classes, near the upper end of level requirements, you could probably get some more armor out of it, but you can get a decent amount of armor. You got a range. You get a flat 114 and then anywhere from 50 to 100. So let's just say 214 max. Let's compare that to something like Nullport, which gives you 220. We'll come back to Nullport in a little bit. As you could tell, there's a range, but it gives you something. It gives you some good stats. Let's also talk about what else that you get out of here. Why is this good? All right, you have 15% less damage taken while wielding a two-handed weapon, two-handed melee weapon to be exact. And to be fair, when you're wielding a two-handed melee weapon, you may not always be doing a melee build. You guys might remember I used Titanheart in the Electrified Javelin build. Looking at Tirani's Bident, even though it was a throwing build, the Bident is still considered a melee weapon. So as such, even though I was standing, kind of far back, just chucking spears, since it's considered a melee weapon, I got that 15% damage reduction. 15% damage reduction is pretty good for any class to get it as part of your thing, but it does require a two-handed weapon. Oh well. Let's also talk about what else you get out of it. Increased melee damage. Now, most people, when they're using this, requires a two-handed melee weapon, they're probably doing a melee build. Now, I use the Electrified Javelin build as an example of something that you could do that is ranged that can benefit from Titanheart. But nonetheless, I wanted to mention the fact that it's probably going to be used by melee builds. So getting an extra melee damage increase, I think, is pretty good. Next, in this one, I'm going to admit it here. This is where Titanheart is really good, but also has been kind of power corrupt a little bit, but it's still good. As you can tell, let me go over to this one. The health increase that you get from Titanheart, 30 to 40%. That is anywhere from a high T6 to a very high T7 percent health. Here's the thing. They've been slowly increasing percent health over, I feel like every season, from beta into launch, from launch into 1.1, from 1.1 to season 2. Percentage health and flat health has been increased. Well, at least health has been increased. I'll need to double check on the percent health, but nonetheless, the percent health increases have gone up, but Titanheart has not been touched as far as I can tell. It is still that standard 30 to 40%. It is still good. That is a free T7 or T8. Yeah, I'm going to say it's a T7. T7 caps out at 39 now. I believe T7 used to cap out at 36 or even 34. It was somewhere around there. But now that it caps out at 39%, it's I could see it, but imagine combining both of them. That's what I've done with this right here. On this suffix, I have a T7 36% increase. With this, 34% increase. All could potentially go up to 40%. But if you look at that, that is literally 2 T7% health increases. Very nice when you're using this. Now there is, I feel like they don't do this as much anymore, but with Titanheart, there's a kiss curse, right? So the curse, the kiss is, look at all this good stuff you get. The curse is you don't regenerate health. And especially in season 2, that's a bit of a bummer because they increased health regen across the board. You know, all these new places for health regen. So it's a little bit of a bummer. I'm not going to lie, guys, but Titanheart, I think, is still best in slot for most two-handed melee builds. So let's compare it to something like not Titanheart, Nullportent. So Nullportent has a lot of nice to haves, right? It gives you 220 armor, gives you melee leech, right? You get to leech health, you get overkill damage, leeches health, increase leech rate, increase health. Now, not quite as high, right? It caps out at 20%, but hey, 20% increase health, right? Physical resistance, and the creme de la creme. It's a little confusing. I understand it's a little confusing, so I'm going to go ahead and break it down because I know, at least for me, I thought this is the way that it worked. Originally, I used to think just be overcapped by 20% on your resistances across the board, right? You can be 2% here, 2%, and you'll get the damage reduction. No, you have to be overcapped on each individual resistance. When you do that, that particular resistance will get a damage reduction. So they give the example of fire resistance. For example, having 85 fire resistance will cause you to take 5% less fire damage because you are 10% above the normal cap. Right? So 1% less damage taken per 2% resistance above the normal resistance cap, up to 20% less damage taken. I thought if you had just one resistance or maybe a couple that equal 20% above cap would give you this 20% damage reduction across the board for every resistance. It doesn't work like that. You have to be the magical number, I believe, is 40%. Yeah, 40% in each cap. The magical number is 115. You have to be at least 115 in each stat while wearing a Nullportent, and you will get up to 20% damage reduction. So that's good, right? You're not restricted to having to using a two-handed melee weapon. You can do a sword and board. You can do various other things, and you can still slam it with percent health and benefit from having extra health. You can double dip, not as much as Titanheart. So why do I still prefer Titanheart over something like Nullportent? Nullportent is loaded. All right, Nullportent is loaded. Why do I still prefer Titanheart? Well, it's simpler, right? You don't have, it's just equip it, get instant buff if wielding two-handed melee weapon. On top of it, right? On top of it, even if you're overcapped in each resistance, there's still the issue of resistance shred. You take 1 mark for death. You take poison resistance, poison damage. Poison, the ailment, shreds your poison resistance. I know, right? It's a double whammy. Adding salt to the wounds, right? That's a whole different unique. So when you shred the resistance, you also lose the damage reduction. So if you were at a perfect 115, right, and then you get a reduction of, let's say, 20% to your poison resistance, you're going to lose 10% damage reduction when your resistance gets shredded. There's just so many conditional modifiers to it that I personally prefer Titanheart. Now, if you watched my Black Blade Ride video, that was a bit of a recap right there. So thank you for sticking around. But I wanted to give to the person who didn't see that video or, just wants a why Titanheart. Here's the reason. Here's the reason why. I think Titanheart is simpler. It gives you increased melee damage because you're probably being a melee build. You get the 15% less damage taken with no conditional modifiers, and you get a huge amount of health. You get one drawback, which is you don't regenerate health, but beyond that, I think Titanheart is a loaded chess piece, and we'll see. They haven't nerfed it yet. I don't think they will, but you know, the damage reduction in season 2 has been brought up a couple times. Do we have too much damage reduction? That's not what this video is about. It's just to give you some ideas to go out there and work on your builds. That's why I mentioned the Tyranni's Bident. It's a ranged weapon. It's a range. In theory, the way I used it was ranged, but since it is melee, you get the benefit. And, you know, you can work on some different things. This one, you're a very healthy person. Extremely healthy with this one. This one, especially if you're a Void Knight, you're really healthy with this. So, yeah, guys, that's the video. If you made it all the way to the end and you like what I do here, possibly leave a like, possibly subscribe. Thank you so much for being here, and hopefully I can see you guys in the next one. Peace out.